is another one that was another crack in the armor. The story of Jephthah.
Woo! That's Judges 11. Oh my God.
All right. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the story, there's a soldier in Israel named Jephthah, and he's gonna go into battle, but he's not confident about his troops. Like, oh, it's gonna be pretty tough. These guys are gonna be kind of pretty difficult. So I'm gonna ask God to help me win. Which, okay, fine. And he asked God to help him win, but he says, "Hey, I'll sweeten the deal. If you allow me to win, when I get home, the first thing that walks out of my house, I will put a sacrifice." Weird thing to say. First of all,
thing that walks out my house.
My house, right? It's like,
you couldn't do anything else. You couldn't say like the first animal I see on my way back,
right? Yeah,
like that. The first thing what is walking out of your house but a person,
right? What did you were like, man, my house cat is always the first thing out of the house. Yeah. So of course, yeah. So God does, so he goes into battle and wins, and he comes back home all confident, and his daughter steps out of the house because she's excited that her dad came home from combat. Of course it's going to be a family member. And so he goes, oh no, I couldn't possibly have foreseen this. And so he tells his daughter, which what I love about the story, the girl is not even named. She doesn't even get a name in this story. Like,
she's just the daughter.
Jephthah's daughter. Like, not
she's like 12. I want to say
not an important
girl. And so like, it's crazy as fuck. That entire story is insane because the thing that I did not understand was the part where he like sends her away for like 2 months.
So yeah, so he comes out. She comes out. He breaks down crying. She's like, well, Pop, what's wrong? And he says, boy, do I have some bad news for you. Okay, so I was talking to God before this battle, and I told him a vow that I would sacrifice the first thing that comes out of my house, which happened to be you. And she says, okay, that is a real bummer. And he says, yeah, it's kind of tough, right? Awkward. And she says, well, okay, I understand you made the vow to God, but can you give me a weekend to hang out with my friends to mourn the fact that I'll never get married and I'll never have kids and I'm automatically excluded from being in the line of the Messiah? He says, sure. And this is how you know the story's bullshit. She came back. Like she came back.
I would have been out of there. I would have been gone. I'm not coming back.
That's the one saving grace that I know the story didn't happen because no one's coming back from that news. No, and so
I'm like, absolutely not. Even at her age, I'm like, there's no way in the world.
No fucking chance. And
I'm not coming back.
And then she comes back, and the verse says that he fulfilled his vow. So I bring this up to people. I said, okay, that is a human sacrifice to capital G God Almighty. Like, there's no other way to read it. And of course, I'm sure you've heard it, but they find ways to contort this. Is like, well, he didn't actually, he didn't
actually kill her. He just sent her away to go
to a convent
forever. Yeah, it's like, no, that's not what happened. And the sliver of like a source that they have for that is the verse that comes immediately after when he says that he committed or he did it. Mm-hmm. After that, it's a verse that talks about how some women had dedicated the spot that she was executed, that she was like killed at. They had dedicated that and they had like called it a special name, and that was the spot, and that was like a memorial for her. And they're like, no, that just means that she went to go and be with them. And it's like, are you not reading the book? Do you not have it open? Read the text. What does the text say?
Right. You're making it up to make it sound not quite as bad. But okay, let's go ahead and go with that theory. So you're telling me that he basically put her in prison for the rest of her life, and that's the best.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So defend that one for me. Like, tell me how that's good. Where a dad can just imprison his daughter for life. As like, I don't think you win this either way, even if we take the mild route.
No, and the thing is I feel like a lot of them just haven't read that story, and they'll just be like, oh well, it must have been this, because they'll come up with excuses for literally anything. Just like in Judges 19, when the prostitute gets chopped into 12 pieces. It's like it's an insane. It isn't the concubine. Excuse me, because she was the second wife. Mm-hmm. Gets chopped up into 12 pieces. Are you familiar? You're familiar?
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay, perfect. Just double checking, but just that. That story has never, ever made sense to me. It's stories like that I'm like, why is this in the book?
I was right about to say that.
Yeah, I'm like,
I don't know why that story's there. Like, I don't
to include that.
It's so for those who don't know the story, there's a Levite who goes into town. These stories are so wild.
We love it. We're summarizing.
A Levite is a man of God. So there's 12 tribes in Israel. Actually, maybe 13. I think it's the 13th. Anyway, but in Israel, and he's a Levite. The Levites were the tribe for the priesthood. Like that's the tribe that Moses and Aaron came from. So they're the priests. So these are the men of God. Like when Jesus tells the story about the Good Samaritan, he talks about the Levite because this guy's supposed to be a good man. So the priest is cream of the crop of what we have here, and he's got a concubine. He's got a second wife, and that's another thing with polygamy and stuff. It's like, the Bible never said anything bad of polygamy. Not once. Yeah. It never one time. It's like you guys say biblical marriage is one man. Well, show me. Like, show me anywhere.
That's another thing. I'm like, y'all don't read the book itself. All of these like so-called Bible heroes had like 15 wives.
Right.
They were sleeping with everyone.
I'll get back to the Levite one, but I remember in college, so the boys in college did this because like the girls didn't study Bible because they weren't supposed to, basically, and so
that might have been the reason why they told us that we weren't supposed to read it.
Yeah.
To account the fact that I'm a woman, that might have been what it was.
Almost certainly. I remember being very upset with the women in my Bible college because they didn't seem nearly as interested. And it took me a while to figure out, they're probably like, shoved away from, like, don't worry about that. Your husband will figure it out for you. Yeah. And so I remember talking about this because I spent like a couple of months on this monogamy thing, because the only verse that you can find that endorses monogamy at the expense of polygamy is when they're talking about bishops, and they say bishop must be the man of one wife. That's it. That's the only time you invite. It never said for anybody else. No. And when you look at all the people like the patriarchs and the kings and stuff, hundreds of wives, and
there are many wives, and they all live together. That's the crazy thing about it. I'm like, why are you all here? Like,
so that's what I brought up. I said that, okay, we were talking about the story of Jacob, and Jacob had 2 wives and a couple of concubines, and so and they were all vying for Jacob's attention because they wanted the children, because that raises their status, and I get it. I would too in that case. And I said, okay, Jacob is a human being. He's a man just like the rest of us. You're telling me he wasn't having threesomes? Right. You really think that? You tell me that a man with like 4 women that are hit? Of course he is. Like, there's no way.
Like, I know he did. I know he did. And the thing that gets me is that the wives that he had were not only his cousins, but they were sisters. They're sisters.
They were sisters.
And the other 2 concubines are both of their cousins. I'm like, what is this? Everyone wants this dude's dick. What is going on?
So Jacob, I'm running off track here. What was I talking about? Oh, Levite. Don't forget the Levite, TJ. Okay, yes, Levite. I have Jacob written down. This interview is all over the place, but I love it.
But okay, that was fun.
It's fun. So Jacob was another early crack in the armor, because I was fascinated with the book of Genesis. That's where most of the cool stories are. Like, Genesis is nothing but like a murderer's row of fun stories the entire time.
There's so much killing, sacrifices, wars, everybody's dying. It's crazy.
It's crazy. There's angels with with fire swords and shit. It's awesome.
It's crazy. It's like, where does all this come from? It's insane. I had to realize that it was about. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, please.
I had to realize that a lot of Genesis was about like the start of nations, and so a lot of like the names that were mentioned, they were talking about like individual people, but they were talking about like the birth of nations. I had to figure that stuff out too whenever I was studying, because that's another thing they don't teach us in the Bible. But
so they taught us that. They taught us that because they taught us a story like with Lot and his daughters. Like, they made it very clear. It's like, this is the start of the Moabites and other people. Yeah, I remember them teaching that.
They didn't teach that stuff. It's crazy. It's crazy that they taught y'all, because that wasn't. I'm like, all of this was stuff that I had to figure out on my own, because now I'm really starting to see. I'm like, okay, my church, or the churches that I went to, or maybe just that just Kojic in general, is just really sexist. That might just be kind of just. Kind of just like, you don't need to read. Like,
that was all of them. I think that was all of them.
You're right.
I will say that my church and the high school, like with the Christian high school I went to, they did put a big emphasis on reading the Bible and studying, and they did encourage us to ask questions. What they didn't like is when you didn't accept their answer. That's when they got upset. Like, they're like, whoa, hold on, this usually works. What's going on here? But I remember being a child, probably 10, 11 years old. And I remember learning that when Jacob's name was changed from Jacob to Israel. And they said, well, they changed it from Jacob to Israel because Jacob means trickster. And I was like, oh, that's a strange coincidence that Jacob is named Trickster and everything he's done. He's like the Loki of the book of Genesis. I said, yeah, was that? Like,
that's a great way to compare him.
He is, yeah.
He literally is. That's insane because he's going through, he's doing all of this stuff. He's getting literally everything he's ever wanted, and he's going around and he tricked his brother twice, tricked his dad. He was his mom's favorite. He was like a mama's boy.
Tricked his uncle.
I'm like, he's just going through. And the thing is when I covered that story, people were in the comments and they were like, does Jacob ever get like punished for this, or is he just going through? He's taking people's wives, taking their cattle, taking their land, taking their blessings. I'm like, and so I didn't read far enough to see, but I'm like, Jacob needs to get his ass.
I'm having a hard time thinking of a time Jacob got punished for this shit. Like, I guess the closest is that when he tricked Esau one too many times, Esau kind of like got really pissed and he got scared and he ran away from home.
Yeah. That's where he met his two wives.
Yeah, right. It's a trick is another family member.
Tricks another family member. I'm like, you just keep doing this stuff.
Oh, well, you know what? He did get tricked by his uncle, though. Laban did trick him into marrying the wrong daughter. So
that's right.
Maybe
he married the oldest one first, but he wanted the younger one. And so he ended up tricking her. And the thing is that it's like, was it that dark in there that y'all you couldn't see?
Were they the
You can hear her voice. You didn't like. I don't understand how you got that mixed up. Like
they were the exact same height and frame.
I'm like, listen. I think about my sister. I'm the oldest. Me and my sister don't really look all that much alike at all.
It's like, this story would work if they were identical twins. That's the only way the story would work, and you made it clear that they weren't. So sorry.
I'm like, you would have known, and I don't think it would have been easy to trick you unless you were just a straight up dumbass. But
unless that wedding may have been one hell of a party. Who knows how drunk they were?
Hey, some people say that burning bush. People were on that burning bush.
The burning bush. I always joke about this. I remember I was saying like, all right, it's weird that we call it the burning bush. We should call it the talking bush. Bushes burn all the time. Like that's not a miracle. The talking bush. All right, that's what I'm into because it spoke.
I'm like a literal voice somehow like came off of it, and it's like that was an insane story for me to read, honestly. Like, I'm like, what do you mean Moses is talking to a bush? What do you mean?
The fact that the bush was on say what?
I said, is this dude on something? Like,
yeah. The fact that the bush was on fire, least interesting part of that story. It's like by my country mile. But I do remember being bothered that Jacob, and then I saw this theme a lot of times that these people had names that reflected their character. It's like, okay, this is like what you would do in a story where you would give, and then I thought, okay, well, maybe Jacob wasn't actually his name and that it was recorded this way for that. That's the thought I had. It's kind of like, I don't know if you ever watched Pitch Perfect. You ever seen the movie? So Pitch Perfect is an interesting movie to me because, the first time I saw it, I didn't watch it on my own volition. I watched it because I was talking to this girl this one time, and I went over
to do
it. Say what?
I said that's one way to do it.
I was over at her house and we were just bored, and she's like, "Oh, we should watch a movie," and I said, "All right, sure." And so she walks over and she picks up this like pink and purple DVD. And I was like, oh my God, I'm about to sit through 90 minutes of like some garbage chick flick. And it was Pitch Perfect. Breathtaking. I loved every fucking second of that movie. And I was like, I was on the edge of my seat the entire time. And Das Sound Machine was robbed. They were much better at the end. And but I remember one of the biggest laughs I ever had was either Pitch Perfect 1 or 2. I don't remember which one it was, but it's when Anna Kendrick's character is talking to this guy and she mentions that she's never seen Star Wars. And that he's like, oh yeah, he's like, you should check it out. It's a really good movie. And he's like, there's a really good twist in the second part. And she says, is Darth Vader Luke's dad? And he's like, what? He's like, how did you know that? She says, well, Vader means father in German. And I just started laughing so fucking hard.
I forgot about that scene. Now I gotta go back and watch that movie because I feel like I haven't seen that scene.
Oh my God. It was a pop. I didn't know that. I didn't know Vader meant father in German, but like it was just so funny that the answer was right there in front of you the entire time.
I feel like that's just That is insane. How did I not know that?
Yeah,
I was a choir kid. We watched that movie all the time. It was nothing but Pitch Perfect. How did I forget that?
It may have been Pitch Perfect 2. It was one of them. So it might have been Pitch Perfect 2.
It might have been the second one.
Yeah, but yeah, that was always funny to me. Back to the Levite, folks. So the Levite, start with the Levite.
So far off topic.
But he goes into town. These are just so cathartic for people like us. Like it's just like it's but he goes into town and he stays in a hotel. And I can't remember, like, the prostitute was, or the concubine wasn't allowed in, or maybe she left for something. For some reason, she's outside. I don't remember why she was outside.
She got thrown outside because
okay.
Yeah, the dudes came and they were like, "Hey, we want to."
Oh, yeah. Right, and like Lot, yeah.
They threw, and he threw her out for the night, and then he woke up the next morning, and she's just laying outside, and he's like, "Get up," and she's dead. It's not funny. It's just the way that he was like, "Get up, we got shit to do," and he doesn't care that she's just laying on the ground, unresponsive. But yeah,
the callous nature too.
I heard right correctly. It was because she got thrown out.
Yeah, I forgot. Yeah, she got thrown out, and so she's raped to death all night, and then he slices her body into 12 pieces and mails the 12 pieces to the 12 tribes of Israel, and saying, "This will teach you a lesson how evil Israel is." It's like, what? What?
That was my question when I read. It was like this happened. The reason why this story was in there was to show like how evil the people were, and I'm like, that just means that God watched it happen and was just like, "Well, there you go. You can do that. You can use your free will today. I won't impinge on it today. Maybe tomorrow, but not right now." And
like 12 letters would have sufficed. You didn't need to send her horse. Yeah, what?
Why did you have to chop her body? I'm like, I don't understand that. You could have just given her a regular burial. I thought for a while, because I couldn't find an answer for that, for why he had to chop her up. I was like, what was the reason of him dismembering a literal body? Why? I'm like, I couldn't find an answer. I don't know why that happened. I'm like, for what? Why would you? You know how hard it is to cut a body up? Like,
I just remember reading that story and I'm like, okay, so you're not the worst person in the story, but
you're kind of up there. Like,
this doesn't make you look good either, my guy.
No, I'm like, come on, this is actually insane. Like, why? What about the girl's family? Like, nobody missed her. Nobody. What?
It is one of the most like inscrutable Bible stories there are, because you're right. Like many times I was like, why is this here? What you could have ended the story with the dead concubine and the message would have gotten across just fine. People are evil and fucked up.
There, but like, I don't know. There's sometimes where I have to dig really deep into stuff because I'm like, this just sounds too crazy. And then when I find the answer, the supposed like Christian answer, it makes it sound crazier. And I'm like, okay, well, this is just insane. I don't know.
Doesn't help. This goes back to what we were talking about where the God of the Old Testament was several different gods that they kind of like retconned into one. And when God shows up with two angels to talk to Abraham, and he's like, "Hey, your nephew is living in Sodom, and so I don't like Sodom. I'm going to get rid of him. That's what I'm going to do." And he says, "Well," and once again, Abraham is thinking, my nephew lives there, so I don't want it destroyed. So I'm going to bargain God down, as if God wouldn't already know that. I'm
like, I couldn't get that part at all. I was like, what do you mean he's arguing back and forth with God, trying to bargain with him, trying to get him to cut a deal with him? I'm like, is this not the all-powerful deity? Why is he cutting deals with folks? Not folks, puny humans. Why would he do that?
It makes no sense at all. And then he gets it down to a reasonable number. It's like, okay, I'm sure there are at least 10 good people in Sodom. So we'll go with that. God can read my mind through this whole thing. So I don't want to just lead with this shit and say, "Hey, I'd rather you not kill my nephew." Like, why not just say that out loud? But
no, it was so pointless. And it was the way that they wrote it out in the Bible itself was so pointless. They were like, they literally went through it and they were like, "Well, what if there's 90? What if I find 90 people? Well, if it's 90, then this. Well, what if it's 80? Well, if it's 80, then that." And it just keeps going. I'm like, we're wasting paper. What is this?
We get the point. point. And so then God, because God can't be bothered to do his dirty work himself, he sends two angels.
You gotta send them to do it. And the thing is the angel's job, from what I read in there, none of the entire story just does not make sense at all. But the angel's job was supposed to go in there. At first, the angel's job was to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. It literally says that in the Bible. Like, the angels were like, God sent us here to destroy it. But then at the same time, I was like, do they know they're supposed to be searching for 10 righteous people? They didn't search for the people. They didn't find them. They didn't look for them anywhere. They got into the city. The group of men or whoever immediately wanted to rape them as soon as they got taken into the home with Lot. And from there, they were like, well, we're just going to destroy this entire thing because these dudes outside tried to rape us. They didn't search for the 10 innocent people. They didn't even bring up the 10 innocent people ever again in that story. And they just at everybody. And I'm like, what happened to the bargain? What was the point to going through all of that?
What I really love about that story is it wasn't just a group of men that demanded them. It was every man in the city.
Everybody in the city gathered around Lot's house. I'm like, did they ring a bell and say, hey, we got two people here? How did everybody get around Lot's house and they all want to rape the angel? I'm like,
no one worked the night shift. No one was asleep. No one was traveling. Every man in the city showed up to Lot's house to rape two men. And
I'm like, what even? And even looking at that, the proportions. How would that work? Everyone in the city.
Well, it works one way. The person ends up dead when you're done.
I mean, yeah, but it's like you only got two people. By the time they end up dead, somebody's not going to get a turn. So what?
Yeah, right. Yeah, you make those guys airtight the entire night. It's still like going to take quite some time.
This is what I mean when I say it's really funny whenever you go through and actually read it. Because when they tell you the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, they tell you a very vague version of the story. They don't go through the details of finding the 10 innocent people, because once you do that, you have to acknowledge the fact that they never looked for those 10 innocent people. And they don't bring up any of the other details. And this was the biggest part of that. I made a video about Sodom and Gomorrah. This was the biggest part of it. The idea of Lot's wife turning into a pillar of salt. For so many years, they taught us that she was turned into a pillar of salt as they were escaping Sodom and Gomorrah. And that's not what happened. She didn't get turned into a pillar of salt as they were escaping. They were already gone. They were gone. They had already, like, Lot had made like a deal or something with God, and he was like, see, more bargaining, and made a deal with God, and he was like, because God had told him originally to go to the mountains. He was like, you'll be safe there. I want to get you as far away as possible because we're not only destroying Sodom and Gomorrah, but also the surrounding areas. And so he tells them to go to the mountains, and Lot's like, I don't want to go to the mountains. Can I go to this one city over here? And God's like, yeah, sure. Why not? They get to the city, and then that's when the destruction starts happening. And so Lot's wife was looking at the destruction from the other city. And so my question has always been, how does that work? What does, like, and I'm like, who saw her? Because it wasn't when they were running. It was when they were already in the city. I'm like, how far away is this city? Because he said he was going to destroy the surrounding areas. So I'm like, she got turned into a pillar of salt for looking at the city from a distance? How does that add up? And so it was for so many years, I was just taught she was turned into a pillar of salt. She looked back and that was it. And they don't go into like actual details of it. But when I read it and I went through it, it was like, yeah, they had made it to the city, and then that's when the destruction happened, because God was like, I can't do anything until you're gone. And so it was the entire thing. And so for me, I'm like, how did she see it? How did she look back and turn into a pillar of salt? Who saw her? And if someone else saw her, why didn't they turn into a pillar of salt? There's so many questions that like line up with it, because Lot and his daughters didn't go to the mountains until after the destruction had already happened, and they went to the city, and then they moved from the city to the mountains. But like, his wife had been turned into the pillar of salt after they got there. And I was like, for one, why? They were already gone. Like, if she was looking from a distance, I guess that's fine. But again, who saw her?
Well, there's two things I have to say about that one. The first is I didn't know that they were in a different city, because that makes the next part not make sense. Because if they were in the city that wasn't destroyed and they moved to the mountains, why would his daughter say, well, the world has ended. It's like, hold on, you were just in another city.
I'm like, that's the thing that didn't make sense to me. The daughters were like, well, no other men here gets to rape our dad. Like, there's nobody else here. And that's the thing that I was wondering too, because I was like, they went from Sodom and
I didn't know that.
Yeah, no, I didn't know that either until I said, that's the reason why I do The Bible Doesn't Make Sense.
Yeah,
that's the reason why I do it, is because I will go back and actually study and read through and like figure out the context, read the surrounding chapters and all of that to figure out what's going on here. But when you go back and read Genesis 19, when he's going through and destroying everything, he ends up, telling them, you can go to this one city that's far-ish away. It's far enough away that it won't get destroyed, but it's far away enough so that, you'll be away from everything. Because, originally they wanted to go into the mountains, like I said. And so, they had already escaped to
Wow, I know that.
Yeah, it's insane. They'd already escaped to the other city, and they were already there. And then that's when the destruction started to happen. And so this narrative that she was turned into a pillar of salt while they were escaping, that's not true. They were already in there. Yeah.
And the second thing is something that has, I don't know, it's bugged me forever. Why a pillar of salt? There's no exposition on the symbolism or the reason or nothing. It's like, it's what happens.
Well, I'm like, but why? Like, out of all things, and no one else, to my knowledge, gets turned into a pillar of salt in the Bible.
No.
I'm like, to my knowledge, no one else gets turned into a pillar of salt. So I'm like, what was special about Lot's wife? And the only answer that I could come up with was they were raining down sulfur, and so somehow, some way, salt. But that's like the only answer I can come up with, because I'm like, how else does that make sense? And plus, it says that God turned her into a pillar of salt. Why would he, like, out of all things that he could have chosen? He could have just struck her dead.
He could have struck her dead.
Yeah, he could have just struck her dead. He's done it to other people, apparently, in the Bible. And I'm like, why? Salt? And actually, I think I might know a reason. So there is there's an actual pillar of salt on the Dead Sea that is called Lot's wife.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like maybe people saw that and they kind of either made the story. I don't know how old the pillar of salt is. I don't know.
I was gonna say, how old is this pillar of salt? Yeah,
I don't even know. I'm like either they saw the pillar of salt and made the story, or they had the story and then the pillar of salt came afterwards or something. I don't know. But I'm like, that part I can't understand at all. I'm like, salt? Why?
One of the weird, because it's just weird, because usually they explain when something weird happens and they make no effort to explain what's
right. Anything about it. They were just like, she got turned into a pillar of salt. Now she's dead, I guess. And it's like, it's like if that's the case, what happened to her? Like, where did she go? What happened?
Yeah.
Because the actual pillar of salt that's off the Dead Sea, it's like really, really big. And I'm like, ain't no way in the world that's like actual. I don't think people believe that it's actually her. Some people might.
Yeah.
But like, I've never been able to understand it. And so I don't know. The only answer that I ever been able to find is that there's an actual pillar of salt called Lot's wife.
I've heard of that pillar of salt. I always assumed that it was just named after her. I never thought that maybe the story was built around it. I don't
know. I feel like anything's possible at this point, because I don't know how old it is. But I think it's like a natural thing. So I don't know.
Yeah. So God's inscrutable actions, and speaking of like God doing atrocious things and destruction is I remember just it was hard. Like, losing my faith, I always say, was the worst part of my life. It felt like I lost a limb. Like, it was a horrible feeling, and I lost my friend, I lost my creator, I lost my purpose for being alive. It was a terrible time. But man, the knowledge, like learning, has been so great, because I ask the same questions that every Christian at one time has at least asked. It's like, okay,
I'm like, you can't say that you haven't at least thought about it.
You definitely have. You definitely have.
Question of being like, well, wait, what if this, but this doesn't? I'm like, I know you've it's at least crossed your mind.
Oh yeah, like you're reading the book of Samuel, and God tells Saul, go into this town, kill the soldiers, kill the civilians, kill the men, the women, the children, the old people, kill the fucking animals, kill them all.
Everybody.
And you definitely thought, wow, that seems like a bit much, And then you find out, well, they don't, but we do. We find shit like this, that, one of the gods is Yahweh, and Yahweh is the war god. That's why he's obsessed with blood.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Like that makes complete sense. It
Mhm.
makes a hell of a lot more sense
Yeah.
than the God of the universe really wants you to bring back 300 foreskins. Like it's like what? It's like,
I can't understand that story. I cannot understand that story at all. And the thing is didn't King Saul only told him to get he only told him to get
he
100?
bought more. He bought more.
All
He
you need
bought
is
more.
100. And David was like, okay, bet, double it. Like, I'm like, you and foreskins. Why? Out of like, why? Out of all things, you could have just killed them. You could have taken heads. You could have done anything else. You could have taken a pinky toe. I don't know, but really, foreskin?
Heads would have been less work. It would have definitely been less work.
And I'm like, I don't even have one. I'm hurting. Like,
So
God.
do you know this story? There's a really funny. It's not funny. It's fucked up in a lot of ways. But so two sons of Jacob. It was Reuben and Levi. And Reuben and Levi.
Mhm.
They were, hanging out doing, nomad things. And they have a sister named Dinah, Dinah. Almost Dina or Dinah. Yeah, okay.
She was the only girl. She was the only daughter that he had because he had a son.
And so, for you guys that don't know, she was working in a different town for this prince, and the prince raped her. He had advances on her. She rebuffed him. She went back over times. He raped her. She comes back. She tells her brothers, and understandably, they're none too happy with this news. So they develop a plan. They develop a genius plan where they say, "Hey, we hear that you're pretty tight with our sister." He goes, "Oh man, she's amazing. I love her." It's like, "Okay, do you want to marry her?" Because they can do that. Yeah, go ahead and marry my sister. And he's like, "Yeah, I'd love to." He says, "All right, cool. Well, check this out. We practice Judaism. Judaism, what's that? Well, it's our faith and everything. If you want to get married to our sister, you have to convert to our religion." He says, "All right, no problem." He says, "There's one catch. You need to get circumcised." And he's like, "Sure." It's like, Jesus, he really,
Yeah.
like, wow, that is
yeah.
And they say, not only you, but since you're the prince here, every man in this town needs to be circumcised. He's like, "All right, I'll put out the news." And so him and every man in that town gets circumcised on the same day. So they're all laid up for like a week and a half, and so Reuben and Levi just go in and slaughter everyone in the town. Like the other guys had nothing to do with this. Like the other dudes had no beef with them whatsoever, but collateral damage. And so like, yeah. Why is God so upset about this shit? Like why?
I will not understand the obsession of foreskins in the Old Testament. There's so much of it; it's actually insane. Like there's another one where Noah's son gets involuntarily circumcised in front of his mother, in front of literally God and everybody, because God was getting, for those who don't know, God was getting ready to kill not Noah.
You know what? Moses. Yeah.
I don't know why I get those mixed up, but I heard a lot of people do. But Moses, God was getting ready to kill Moses at one point, and it was so random, and it comes out of nowhere.
Out of nowhere.
No one knows why he wanted to kill him, what the purpose was, or whatever. The only thing they have to go by is God was mad and was about to kill him, and then out of nowhere they just go and they circumcise the son just like right in front of everybody, and then God's just like, "Okay, everything's good now. I'm fine. I'm not gonna kill you anymore." And it's like, that was the thing that kept you from killing him. Like your favorites. This is how you do favorites. This is what you do.
The only normal part of that story is batshit crazy, minute one to minute done, until the very end, when Zipporah, Moses' wife, says, "You are a bloody husband." Like I was like, yeah, that's a normal human. Is like, what is wrong with you?
Yeah.
Out of nowhere, you just cut off part of our son's dick. What is the deal? Like, all right, okay.
It just did it out of nowhere. I'm like, he had no time to prepare. He had no time to like think about it. It was just immediate circumcision. And I'm like, for one, how did they know what to do? And for two, how did they know that would work? Like, what if you just circumcised him and then God's still gonna kill him? What happens then? You just
guess again, Moses.
See, and so I don't know. The only answer that I ever found was that it was the fact that he like wasn't circumcised, and apparently God was mad enough about his son not being circumcised that he was about to kill not the son but Moses himself, which is another thing. There's so much collateral damage. You mentioned collateral damage. There is so many people who, oh my gosh, who get killed for no reason. They had no part of it. They weren't part of the trauma. They didn't know what was happening, and they died. And it's like, people are kind of just like, well, collateral damage. They just had to die, I guess. And it's like, no, they didn't. They could have been left out of that. Why didn't God? The thing is that in most cases, it's God punishing a specific person by killing other people.
Yeah, someone.
Why?
Yeah, a lot. It's terrorism. Like that's what terrorists do. Yeah, that's what like the bad guys do in comic books. Is like, I can't get to you, Superman, but Lois Lane I can kill. And it's like, well, wait,
kill everything you love. It's like, wait a minute, why can't we just? And actually, in there's a story where David actually asks God at some point. He's like, why are you killing them? I'm the one that did the thing. Punish me. Why are you doing this to them?
I was gonna bring that. Yep.
Mm-hmm. And so,
David's son. David's baby.
Literally, that whole story. Second Samuel 24 was like, it's one of my favorite Bible stories ever because it's insanely fucked up, and no one can give me any sort of explanation about it at all. For those who don't know, 2 Samuel 24, one of my favorite stories ever in the Bible.
Real heartwarmer. This one.
Oh yes, it's all about So David is basically told by God to do a census, and so David goes and counts all of the fighting men, and then when he does it, he comes to the conclusion that he has committed a sin. And it's not that God tells him he committed a sin. Nobody tells him anything. It literally goes from David did the census to I've sinned and now I've got to be punished. And God kind of was just like, okay, pick your punishment. So he sent like an angel or whoever to talk to David and tell him, hey, this is, you get to pick your punishment from this, from this, or this. And he picks the punishment, and it ends up being a, what is the word that I am looking for? A plague. It ends up being a plague, and it ends up killing 70,000 innocent people. 70,000. Just because David did a census that God apparently told him to do. And apparently the thing that he did wrong was it wasn't actually God. That's what the apologists say. Bible doesn't say that. It literally says the Lord. So it ends up being 70,000 people who end up dying for David's mistake. And then David's like, why are you killing all these people? I should be the one that should be punished. And so David does a burnt offering, and then the plague stops. And that's just it. 70,000 lives down the drain for no reason. And then a burnt offering is the one that saved everything. And so that's the story that I look at, and I bring it up to Christians a lot. And they can never argue it because I'm like, how can you defend killing 70,000 innocent people? What did they do? What was their what was their crime? What did they have to do with this? They didn't have anything to do with this at all. It sounds like God just wanted to kill 70,000 people.
Well, that's an interesting story, Serafina. But as an atheist, how can you say killing is wrong? How can you? Where is your moral groundwork to say that it's wrong to kill people? And
it's so funny that they think that we don't have any morals.
They're like, I bet they haven't heard this one before, and they haven't thought this through.
Like, okay, you're so.
Oh, you got me. You got me.
You got me. I don't have any morals. I just go around killing folks because why not? I don't have a God to tell me not to. So
right, yeah.
That's literally their reasoning. Is they're like, and I know most of them, if they didn't have God, they would be out here doing the absolute most.
Yes, I say that to say, listen, if believing in this, like believing in God and going to church keeps you from like killing and raping, and I was like, keep your ass in church. Yeah. I recommend that you stay there because you're a danger to society. If not,
like you are unstable without this God. So go ahead, go.
Yeah.
Right ahead.
I was actually thinking of a different story. I was thinking about David and Bathsheba when I mentioned.
That one too.
Yeah, it happened to David all the time. Apparently, this is
and the thing is that David. Have you ever noticed how a lot of God's favorites are the main ones that were out there sinning and doing?
Garbage people all across the board.
You're God's favorite, and you're out here doing this, that, and the third. Like, come on now! I'm like, this man, David, who is supposed to be like God's chosen,
a man after God's own heart. Yeah.
Yes. Gets some dude killed because he slept with his wife and wants to hide the fact that she's pregnant.
Wait. He also tried to bring him back.
Yeah.
To raise David's bastard kid. I was like, David, holy shit, man. David put in some work.
Didn't he? See, and so that story is just so insane to me because I'm like, how is it that he did all of this and it's not David that gets punished, it's not Bathsheba that gets punished, it's the baby.
It's the baby
that God allowed to be born and
right
for 7 days. I'm like, what was the point? Like, why was the baby even brought into the world to begin with if you were just kill it in 7 days? For what?
It's just like, hey, yeah, he could have just let Bathsheba not get pregnant. All right.
He could have miscarried. That would have made a lot more sense. Like when like once he got the dude killed or whatever, hell, that would show that God was God more than anything else. He caused a miscarriage in a woman, and she just, as soon as the dude died, and as soon as like he knew what David did, she miscarries and she doesn't even have a baby. Like that story makes so much more sense. He made the baby be born and live, and then
suffer and die. Just get sick immediately and die.
I keep asking Christians with all these stories in the Bible, where's the love? Where's the loving God you're supposed to be talking about? Because I don't think he's over here. I don't think he's in this book. I don't know where he is, but he's not here.